about half of marriages end in divorce. The process is painful enough without making hurtful mistakes that could be avoided. Today, two very seasoned divorce lawyers with 80 years of experience between them are going to tell us the most typical mistakes they see again and again and share their observations about marriage and divorce from their vantage point. I'm Dick Oberg, and welcome to Insights, and with us today is Allan Koritzinsky, who recently partially retired. He can't totally give it up after 44 years of practicing family law. He has been a leading member and fellow of Matrimonial Lawyers and was in its National Board of Governors. Some called him in his hometown the Dean of Divorce Lawyers. He was listed for 20 years in the best lawyers in America. Also with us is Daphne Webb. She also has a long list of credentials. She also served as a past governor of the American Academy of Matrimonial Lawyers. And in Woodward White's Best Lawyers in America, she was recognized as tops in family law and alternative dispute resolution. She's been the editor-in-chief of the Wisconsin Journal of Family Law, and she's been practicing for about 42 years. Wow. Well, thanks for both of you being here and sharing all your years of experience. Why don't we begin with the beginning for the client? When they walk in the door, when they pick a divorce lawyer, are there things they might not know about how to pick the right divorce lawyer, a family lawyer?
Well, I think the thing for the client to look for would be, first of all, a lawyer who is going to be responsive to them. The biggest complaint that clients have about their divorce lawyers is that they don't hear back, their lawyer doesn't return phone calls, hard to reach. It's a lack of communication. So
why do lawyers do that? Why don't they return phone calls?
Well, lawyers can maintain a fairly busy practice. Sometimes they don't moderate the flow of new cases and they don't have enough help. And so they're genuinely busy. Sometimes they put off a return phone call because they might not have called the other lawyer or completed the task at hand. Mm-hmm. But I think in my experience, clients really appreciate it when they can have contact. It doesn't have to be a long conversation, but just to get the feedback.
Allan, were you like that? Would you be a kind of guy that would take the cases and not return the calls?
I used to have that issue.
You did?
Yeah.
What an honest guy.
Yeah, and it was because I was at or above overload. Mm-hmm. And what I learned was that it was a disservice to the clients and a disservice to me. So as I culled the practice and took fewer cases, it had no impact on revenue, but it actually improved client service.
Well, how does anybody know this before they hire a lawyer?
They don't.
Yeah.
There's two things they don't know, and that's one of them, and it's how responsive the lawyer is going to be. The other thing they really don't know and they don't ask is, what is your plan? Do you have a strategy as to how you're going to handle my case? Meaning, how long is it going to take? Approximately some range of fees, an early identification of issues, what the impediments to settlement are. And many lawyers at the initial meeting or even the first 2 or 3 meetings, they don't have a plan.
If your goal was just marketing, you wanted to get clients, and you wanted them to think, this is the lawyer I want, would you be totally yourself and totally honest, or are there selling points that maybe the person going through a divorce are suckers for?
We get that because sometimes they'll be shopping. And they'll tell you, well, I'm going to see 2 or 3 lawyers. And I always say, no, don't tell me who the lawyers are, because that will impact how I present myself at the initial meeting.
How could it impact you?
Well, because I know all the lawyers in the community.
Yeah.
So I don't want to know until the end. And then I say, oh, by the way, tell me who else.
But what I'm wondering is, do you do things like say, I win every case?
No.
You're on the right side.
No.
Things like that. Or say, we're going to get your spouse. Or, what are the things that would make your skin crawl, but lawyers do to get the client?
What a good question, because our main job, I think, is managing the client's expectations, because in most cases, the range of outcomes is pretty much known in advance. And if you have a good lawyer with a lot of experience, I mean, the years of experience really do help. That lawyer is going to be able to tell you in the first meeting pretty much the range of
outcomes.
Outcomes.
Yeah.
And we know that the other spouse's lawyer, if they're good, they're going to be giving the same kind of advice. And so for us to manage those expectations really helps the clients, because a lot of people are so angry and so upset, have inflated ideas about what the legal system can do for you. And really the legal system is pretty much of a blunt instrument.
What do you mean?
Well, there's a lot of subtleties in people's dynamics of their relationships that are never going to get addressed by the divorce court or by the arbitrator.
You mean that he was a jerk, or she was not loyal, or?
Yeah, I think people have that sense that, if only the judge hears how terrible my spouse was, some undefined good thing will happen for me. And so, it's a little bit of psychology, I guess. I hope we're not practicing psychology without a license, but to work with people on
this
that.
interests me, this part of it.
Yeah. Daphne mentioned managing client expectations. The other management challenge is managing clients' emotions. So again, this is sort of on the borderline of law and psychology and social work, but the truth of the matter is clients come in angry, they come in anxious, they come in paranoid, distrustful, they come in nervous, they're worried about their future. This is a really critical time in their life.
So tell me what you mean by paranoid, about what?
Well, they're worried about what are people saying, or they're worried about what's going to happen. It's just these unrealistic fears that something bad is going to happen. It happens a lot in child-related issues. My spouse told me he or she's going to take the kids away from me. And that just sends, especially mothers, but dads too, in the roof. And so managing those emotional issues on the part of the lawyer is really important.
Okay, so
and there was no course in law school called management of client expectations or anger. And if there was, I must have missed the class.
I bet you did okay, though. In comes a client who does the very thing Allan's talking about. It's a man who says, she says I'll never get to see the kids. How do you manage his emotions? He's scared, he's angry.
Well, I think it's really good to do a lot of listening during the first meeting rather than a lot of talking and instructing. And I always ask one question of my clients when they come in for that first meeting, and that is, what are your goals? Because I want the client to tell me what's important. I always write it down. We can always come back to that at a later point in time. But, being a good listener, I think, is very helpful. People can get it off their chest. And then we can start to talk about the reality of what the court system will do. And I try to avoid you should or you must, and explain it in terms that can be accepted by the angry client.
And I'm going to play off Daphne's word of goals, and I'm going to suggest that there are two kinds of goals. What we call objective. We can measure them. They're very specific, and they're very easy to identify, and clients always know what they are. But then there's something called subjective goals, and they don't have a tangible, concrete value, but they're really important.
Can I stop you? What are the objective goals they know?
I want the house. I want the kids 90% of the time.
Okay.
I want maintenance for life. I never want to pay any maintenance. I'm not paying child support because it's not going to go to the kids, it's going to go to the mom. Those are very, very specific. But then the challenge for the lawyer is to sort of drill down. That's the first layer of the onion. So you peel that away. And the word you want to use is, for objective, you ask what? And for subjective, you ask why. And once you ask them, well, why is it that you want a particular thing? They know the answer, and they're often surprised you ask. And once you find out what the subjective goals are, there's a theory in game theory that goes like this, and that is, on an objective basis, the pie is 100%. But there's a statistical analysis, which we won't get into, that says if you also factor in the subjective goals, it gets to about 120, 130.
Right, sure.
The pot is now 140%.
Right.
Well, when you divide 140% in half,
Can't get it all.
but you get 70.
Right.
If you divide the objective pot in half,
50.
at best you get 50.
Yeah.
So the key is understanding the objective and the subjective goals, and the clients won't volunteer that.
Okay.
It's all up to the lawyer.
Okay, so let's say they say, well, I want the house and I don't ever want to pay any alimony. What are the subjective that you find out when you explore that?
Well, someone might want the house. Let's say a female client, a mom with some kids, and she feels that it's an emotional attachment to the house, her children. It involves her children and their sense of safety and security. And so if you ask the why question and if they can articulate it, then maybe you can steer the conversation to the practical aspects of it, such as, are you going to end up with the house but none of the retirement? Mm-hmm. Are you going to be putting all of your eggs in one basket? In a couple of years, if you have to sell the house, you will have all those closing costs. Your children, are they really maybe a little more resilient than you are giving them credit for? You can get into that kind of discussion.
So you're kind of really doing some therapy here.
Yeah, yes.
Well, not therapy in the sense of counseling them, but a quasi-therapy in the sense that you're doing what mental health professionals are expert at, and that's asking the right questions. So you ask her, well, why do you want the house? And she says, well, it's a neighborhood I've known for a long time. My friends are there. The kids' friends are there. It's near the school. I don't drive, and where I work is only 7 blocks from where I live. So once you develop that, you can see that this is not traditional positional bargaining. She's digging in. Mm-hmm. She's really giving what appear to be some pretty bona fide reasons. And then the lawyers sort of go from there. But if her reason is, what's the real reason you want the house? Because I won't let him have the house because he did some things in that house that I will never forgive him for. Well, that may be real, but it won't resonate with a judge.
How do you get her off that?
Time and coming up with other alternatives.
Is anger the most common toxic emotion in this process?
Anger is a big one, but in my experience, the most problematic state is anxiety, because I see a ton of anxiety.
Why is that? How does that work out that it's a problem?
The way it works out is a spouse who feels they need to control the actions of the other spouse, or they need to control the outcome of the divorce. And to me, that's an anxiety issue, but that's a big complaint of clients coming in.
How does that get in their way in the process? How does it hurt the process from their best interest?
People who are anxious have some trouble sometimes separating out what's real and what's unreal, separating out their fears from the realities, accepting advice, seeking advice. It can really get in people's way. And depression, too, is a problem, obviously, and that's a little more of a silent problem. You don't always know when the clients are depressed. And that can really interfere with decision-making, as you know, not news to you.
Yeah.
And we lawyers sometimes wonder, well, why has this client not called me back, or why won't they agree to something reasonable that's been proposed? And
well, what do you do? I mean, if you have a client who's suffering depression, how does that impact on how you practice your family and divorce law?
If they have a counselor, and many to most do these days, or they've seen one in the past, I will ask the client to discuss the mental health issue with his or her counselor. In some cases, I try to get a release so that I can talk to the counselor, or the three of us can talk together. But I will say, this anger issue or this anxiety issue is really getting in the way of our relationship. I'm giving advice, but I'm not sure you're understanding it or following it. And I'm not sure you're making good, sound decisions. I think they're going to hurt you down the road. And this becomes a real issue. And in the back of my mind, I'm always assessing whether or not these mental health issues are what we call states, which means through therapy and through meds, they can be fixed. They are not enduring. They don't go on forever. But if the mental health issues, instead of states, are called traits, if they actually have personality disorders that are personality traits, early in my practice I didn't know this, but guess what? There's no meds and there's no therapy. These are the hard wiring of these people. And the sooner the lawyer figures that out, then you have to work and what we call do workarounds with your own client to deal with the cards you're dealt.
Well, what I'm hearing is when you pick a divorce lawyer, you certainly want someone who will return your calls, but you also want someone who's got really good interpersonal skills. Is that safe to say?
I think that helps. I think it does help.
And insightful.
Yes. The thing about anger, if I may just add something, we do see angry people, and sometimes with the folks who have it as part of a personality makeup.
Yes.
The way I would approach that would be to make it kind of a strategic issue, because what I tell clients, and it's true, if you go into court, the angriest person in the courtroom loses. It's the calmest person who wins, and people want to win. It's a way to help people to kind of start getting a handle on it. And
what's the percentage of people who come in really angry and wanting to get their spouse versus others who come in and say, I don't care, just get it done, whatever they want?
That's an interesting question. I would have answered that differently 30 years ago or 35 years ago, because Allan and I are both, shall we say, mature divorce lawyers. We generally get older people who have significant financial issues to resolve. But younger people in the throes of disputes over child custody and anger, that's really a testing ground for young people, whether they want to stay with divorce law or not.
Let me ask my own colleague this question. Do you think more or less, and I'm going to think about the answer myself, more or less than 50% of our clients have serious to very serious mental health issues, even though they may be temporary, when they come in and when they're going through the process? Is it more or less than half?
Of the population who uses divorce lawyers, generally I would say it's 50%. For our populations, I don't know, maybe a little less than that.
That's a pretty good hunch.
Yeah,
that's a pretty good hunch.
And most of those, I would suspect, are temporary. It's the stress of the...
I think that's true. I think most of these folks get through it. And that's the other thing that a divorce lawyer can do, and that is to give some perspective. There is light, the old adage, there's light at the end of the tunnel. Things will be better, but you're on a journey that this part will end. And the question is how efficiently, how smoothly, how inexpensively. You put all kinds of adjectives up there. But we're going to get you through this. It's not a matter of whether, it's a matter of when and how. And you get them invested in the process. You can determine the when, and you can determine the how.
The client.
Yes. I'm pointing to the client.
Yes.
But the other variable is hard to control. And it's a surprising conclusion I didn't reach when I was a baby lawyer. And that's the spouse and the spouse's attorney. Those are the trump cards. And Daphne and I can almost predict the outcome of the case, not by the facts, not by the client, not by the spouse, but by the lawyer on the other side.
Why?
Because this is a process that is highly influenced by lawyer skill, meaning the art and the science of being a family law attorney.
But are you saying if the opposing lawyer is really skillful, you're going to have a worse outcome?
No. Skillful is good. Smart is good. Honest is good. Experienced is good. That's what you want on the other side. And that seems counterintuitive to clients. What? Wouldn't it be better if my spouse had a really bad lawyer? And then you spend some time saying...
And why is it
Because it's very inefficient. They don't necessarily know what the law is. They don't know this
Why isn't that your
predictable
advantage?
outcome, because the case drags on and there's so many distractions.
Really, what divorce is, I mean, it really is problem solving, and clients don't know that. Sometimes when they're angry, they think that lawyers are a weapon. I'm going to call my lawyer, but really what we are problem solvers. And so to have a team, not a team, but colleagues who are good problem solvers both working on the case is great for clients.
Okay, so I'm kind of hearing underneath this, the client who comes in and says, I want you to get that bad person. You need to move them off that page.
Yes, absolutely.
Or they're going to shoot themselves in the foot.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, and you might even go so far, if your practice is mature and you have the guts to do it, you say, you know, you may be consulting with the wrong lawyer because I don't do it. It's not effective.
You may be adversarial.
Well, intensely adversarial to the point of almost being crazed. So I'll do one of two things. I say, well, you know, I think you might really want to go elsewhere. That's because I don't even want the client. But I do want the client, but I want to start educating. So I'll tell you what, I've even done this. No charge for today. I want you to go see 2 other lawyers. I'm not going to pick them. And then if you like what you get over there, that's terrific. But if not, come on back. My door is open and I'll help you. But this is what I'm going to do, and that's when I lay out the plan.
How long is the average divorce process, beginning to end?
I tell clients generally expect it to take 6 months to a year.
Okay, and in that time, do you see transformations in the personality of your client?
Yes. Yes. Now, keep in mind, we don't want to scare the audience into thinking that divorce is just a landmine of angry feelings and conflict, because not necessarily. I mean, Allan and I both have many clients who are lovely people. You know, what they say about the difference between divorce law and criminal law. In criminal law, you see bad people at their best, and in divorce law, you see good people at their worst.
Yeah.
But we have a lot of people who are well-intentioned and workable, and so it's not all anger and bad stuff. But generally, when people come in angry, it is situational. We have some patience with it and help them get through it.
Here's a phenomena that has taken place in the market, and I'm not sure it's a good one, but it's a true one, and that is the intact couple. They really know what they want. You know what they do?
What?
They don't hire lawyers.
Oh.
And it has nothing to do with gender, it has nothing to do with ethnicity, it has nothing to do with wealth or poverty, and it just has to do with they think they can do it. And the state bars all over the country have forms that people can use, and so the pro se market has mushroomed.
Is that advisable?
Well, I don't think it is.
I don't think so.
Why?
Because these people don't
They
know
skip
what
you guys
they're...
and have to pay you.
Well, that's true, but there are subtleties in family law all over the country, and what these people should do is at least consult with a lawyer once at the front end to get educated, and then a second time before the agreement is actually negotiated and drafted, and then again after the agreement is prepared but not signed. But the people that do that it's a small minority. So they go to one extreme, which is the lawyers are all in, or they go to the other extreme and they want to just eliminate the lawyers completely. And
But, by the way, back to my first question, underneath all this, what I'm hearing is when you go pick a lawyer going through this process and you're upset and you're going to have a variety of emotions that are heightened, you do not want a lawyer who says, we're going to get them.
Right.
Is that fair to say?
Absolutely.
that's one. And the other one is, I guarantee you that the following will happen. The word guarantee is a very dangerous word, but it is a marketing technique by many lawyers. They say, well, I've never lost one of these kind of cases, or I guarantee you we're going to get you X. Clients remember 2 things: how much you said it was going to cost and what result you guaranteed. It's a little bit of a hyperbole and an overstatement, but they forget everything else you told them. They remember those 2 things. So the lawyer has to be very careful on guaranteeing outcomes, which is different from predicting outcomes. And the other one is predicting with mathematical certainty what the fee is going to be. just depends on how the process goes.
When the couple walks in, do you ask them, have you had marriage counseling?
Well, in fact, one person in the couple would walk in because we can't represent them.
Oh, that's right. Of course.
I always ask people if they've had counseling.
You do. Why do you ask them?
Well, I'm not a counselor, and it's not really my realm, but it's so traumatic to go through divorce, even for the person who is initiating it. It's a trauma. It really is. And I think that clients want to do the right thing and be a good person, and you hope that the client doesn't wake up 10 years from now and say, oh, if only I had tried. So I open the topic. I mean, I don't tell them what to do, but I suggest it might not be a bad idea to get some counseling.
Okay, I would like you to put a number on this question I'm about to ask you. What percentage of couples you've seen could have saved their marriage if they weren't so stubborn, angry, ever, had kids, could have saved it if they had gotten some good counseling rather than gotten divorced?
I'm going to say 5 to 10%.
That's all.
Yes.
And Allan's nodding yes.
Yeah, I think it's a small percent. But if you think about it, if the family law attorney could save 15% of all the marriages, and you multiply that by all the people in the country,
Yeah, a lot of people.
that's a lot of people.
Do you try to save the marriage first?
Oh, yes.
Yes, definitely.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, it's not up to, we're not trained as counselors, but we will encourage counseling. And I ask that of every client.
Now, there's two or three advantages for the counseling. One is to explore whether or not reconciliation is a viable alternative. That one's easy. The second one.
Why is that easy?
Well, because it's easy to identify that
Yeah.
issue, not to solve it, but
Yeah.
to identify it. The second one is if there are children, to have the counselor do some counseling on communication
About the children?
about the children, just enhancing the process of communication. That's very, very big. And number three, to reduce some of the mental health, emotional kind of issues that are involved in the case. And then I'm pretty direct. I say, look, not only is it good for your health, it's also good for your wealth. You'll save a lot of money if you can sort of settle down and have a better perspective on what this process is all
Because you'll
about.
be thinking more clearly.
Yeah, and you can make good decisions. So there's all kinds of reasons for counseling.
Let's go back to when there's heat and they're angry. And they're both angry. Are they fighting about what they're really fighting about?
Well,
The house, the custody, blah, blah, blah.
if they want to fight, they will find issues to fight about. And I've noticed something, and maybe Allan has noticed the same thing too. You get through all the big issues, all the tough issues about property and finances and children. And then at the very end, you ask the question, about personal property. And by that I mean the stuff, the pots and pans, the mattresses, the cars. And now, is there anything that the other person has that you want? And then all of a sudden the floodgates open, and it's the last hurrah of contention for these folks. And I think it has to do with it, it really takes a lot of force to bring that separation to its final conclusion, and it kind of boils up over the stuff.
Yeah, I think that's true. And there's a great case, and I actually checked it out, so I know it's true. At the very end, they fought over the Christmas decorations, and they couldn't agree.
Why?
I don't know. And so they had to actually go to court, and the judge decided who got the Christmas tree decorations, and it was the wife.
What I'm hearing Daphne, I think, say is they don't want to face the sadness of the gavel coming down saying you're done.
It's a way to hang on.
And that may have been the reason. So a couple months after the final hearing, there was a deadline for the husband, the father, to bring the Christmas tree decorations. And so at a date and time certain, he brought them over to the house. He rang the doorbell, and he said, "My dear," he probably didn't say "my dear," "here are the Christmas tree decorations." And he held them up, and he dropped them, and they were all crashed and destroyed.
Oh my goodness.
So she brought him into court on a contempt. He was found in contempt, and he had to pay to replace the Christmas tree decorations. Now, who won? At some level, he couldn't let go, and she took it to the mat because she really wanted and needed those Christmas decorations.
Underneath this.
And so the
what was
question really is, what prompts people to do that? And that's a question for the mental health professionals.
Yeah.
We don't know. We're perplexed because they're paying us to be paid gladiators for a battle that is a no-win, and financially it's a lose-lose. But sometimes they do it, and I guess it's just
Well,
human
before we
nature.
close, I got a couple questions for both of you. I'm kind of hearing there's not much difference in this process whether you're rich or middle class. Probably if you're poor, there are other issues around poverty that come up. And also, is there a difference young, old, if you're 30 getting a divorce or 60 getting a divorce? Is there any difference in the process? And I'm assuming the rich, not rich, but...
The process or the outcome?
Well, mainly the process, the emotional process.
In a lot of communities, people are turning more and more to alternative dispute resolution, and by that I mean mediation or arbitration. It's a way to stay out of court. I think people of all ages are getting with this idea. It's can be very helpful. I would say with younger people, kids' issues are there. It can be it presents a different kind of a profile than the older divorce, don't you think, Allan?
Yeah, and I think that people are basically risk averse, and another challenge for the lawyer is to explain that what's best for everybody is a resolution. So you can try the parties talking directly. If that doesn't work, then you can have lawyer-to-lawyer conversations. If that doesn't work, you can have a four-way meeting with everybody together. And then if that doesn't work, you bring in a neutral who will help facilitate and maybe do some evaluation, saying this is what I think a court would do. And then if that doesn't work, then you have an arbitrator who is somebody like a private judge.
Right.
And by the time you work through those 5 alternatives, there are very few cases that ultimately go to
So what
trial.
you're saying, avoid the gladiator, 2 lawyers going at it, trying to fight your fights out.
And clients want that.
Okay.
Yes.
Finally, closing with tips for people who are unfortunately just entering this process and about to knock on the door of their attorney that they're about to hire. What can you impart to them to make this process at least less painful than it otherwise might be?
A couple of points. One is, let your spouse have his or her family as their support. Don't interfere with your spouse's family. Try to get them to influence them against the person. It just makes the divorce harder. Another thing I tell every client over and over again is to grow a very thick skin. Do not take things personally. It will be a much easier process.
Another tip, hire the best lawyer you can, and don't be bashful about going to see at least one other lawyer. And the other is do what we all know we're supposed to do, and that's being honest to yourself and honest to your lawyer.
I'm hearing underneath all this, try to get your anger under control and know when your anger comes up, it's only going to bite you. Is that fair?
Yes.
They're
Yes.
both nodding yes.
Yes.
You're
Okay.
right.
Okay.
You're a wise man.
Oh, well, that's a great way to conclude. Daphne and Allan, thanks very much for sharing your wisdom with us. And I hope you'll join us on the next edition of Insights.